In this module, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to BizFlow's quick process. What we've learned so far is that you can use BizFlow to design and implement very simple to very complex processes that can include information that's routed between humans or human to human processing, or human to human processing, where we're incorporating other business systems. And we can do that in serial or parallel processing. We can do case management types of processing, and we have rules and decision-driven routing. To address more simple processes and to empower or enable business users to create processes, BizFlow introduced this concept or solution called Quick Process. And what it does is it allows a business user, or it could be an IT user, to use a browser-based process wizard. And it allows you to create very simple serial routing processes, which are great for doing things like policy reviews or reviewing marketing collateral or legal contracts. Anytime you want to add documents or attachments and you have very simple review and approval processes, Quick Process is really great for that purpose. So what we're going to do is take a look at building a simple quick process. So logging in using our browser and logging into the BizFlow web client. When I go to the Start New menu, I see this area here for Quick Process. And just like I could start a traditional BizFlow process, one that's been modeled and published, I can start a quick process. And I have two options. I can either build a new process, or I can start an existing process. So it has the concept of process templates. So I created this review for collateral, training collateral process, and it's a simple two-step process. And now that I have selected that from the library or list of processes I previously created, I can edit the process. And it's likely that you would want to edit the process because you're probably going to have different assignees and different deadlines. Of course, maybe not, but more than likely that's the case. So I want to say that the deadline for this particular review of collateral needs to be done by the end of this week. And the next thing I'm going to do then is look at each of the steps in the flow, and I have just two steps in this particular process, and I'm going to set up characteristics of those activities. And what you could see in Quick Process is I could easily add steps to the process or delete those steps. And the other thing that you see is that this is a very serial type of process. So we simply can route work from one step to another, and it does have the option for a step in the flow to choose to reject or send the item back to the previous step in the process. So that's the kind of processes that we can implement. Serial progression, one step at a time going forward, and route back from an activity, from one activity to the previous activity. Once we know what the steps are in the flow, then for each of those steps we can configure characteristics of that individual step. So our first step is to upload documents. And in this case, we're going to say that if we wanted to assign someone specific to this activity, we're going to assign student 1 in our training system to this first step in the process. And we're going to give them a deadline of close of business today to get that document uploaded and sent. You can see that there's other characteristics and attributes that you can assign on this step in the flow. And then by clicking on the Approve Document step in the process or activity, I can now set or change any of the information for that activity. And I'm going to leave the trainer as the approver, and I'm going to set the deadline for the end of this week. And you can see here, of course, that the approver or the trainer can reject this item and send it back. Once you've set up all of the attributes of each step in the flow, you can then set up any reminders for this process. And this, of course, would go to the person who has initiated or started the process, and then any CC recipients, which you'll see in the next step that you can set up. So now that I've set up my quick process, which obviously you can see was very quick to do, I can CC someone if I want to have a courtesy copy go to someone, and now I can just run the process. So I'm going to just run this process. It tells me it's been initiated successfully. And now if I log out as the trainer and I log back in as student 1, we see in student 1's inbox this upload document task. So what we've asked this particular person to do is to upload the documentation that we want to have reviewed through this process. I can open the activity just like you would an activity as we saw in the RMA process or the time off process. And what we see at the bottom is the process outline, and we can collapse that if we want to, or maximize or minimize it, but we can see that we're at this step in the flow. And we can see that it says please upload documents to be reviewed, so that's the guidance that was provided when we created the process. And I can then simply upload or attach documents to this step. And I can then add a comment and send off or complete the activity. And then, of course, in the trainer's inbox is going to be the approval step. And here we see our approved documents step, and we can see the due date. And we can open that item. And here we can see that this is what the student wrote, that they attached the exercise guide for quick process, and we can see the exercise guide, and we can also see that we are in the second step of the process. Now, of course, we could click on and open this particular document and perform the review that we're expected to do. And then, of course, if I wanted to then reject this item, I could send it back to the previous step in the process, or I can simply complete and approve it and end the process. And because of a setting that we had made when we created this process, we can also enable or allow the business user at the time to edit or modify the process. So perhaps in this case, I need an additional approver. I can actually set up one more approver for this process and assign it, and then simply or dynamically on the fly right now modify or change this process as might be needed. And in the same way that you can monitor the running instances or running or open cases for a traditional BizFlow process and see the completed archives, you can do the same with a quick process. You can see here I have my completed processes, and I can just as readily or easily monitor or view the audit history of that process. I see what has occurred in the monitor. I can see the discussions that have transpired on this particular process, any attachments that had been made, and the history of who performed what tasks in this process, and the detailed audit trail. In the next module, I'm going to talk about BizFlow tasking.